Are we kidding ourselves? Do we have any chance whatsoever at racial harmony? I had an interesting conversation with a coworker years ago about race relations, and I don't think I appreciated his point of view at that time. But here's what he said. He said if we lived in a world where everyone had the same skin color, there would still be those who would look for a reason to cause division. And to this day, I agree with him wholeheartedly. And there's a bunch of examples. You can look at the division on the African continent, people of the same color. You can look at some of the different factions of Islam, and like in Iraq, for example, people of the same color. You can move right on to Europe, and I don't know if this is still going on with the Protestant and the Catholics in Ireland, but at one time, people at each other's throats, same skin color, right? So personally, I find it an easier reality to comprehend and predict racism by evolving my understanding of the people who are perpetrating it. And just to share a little bit for those who don't know, my background is that, look, man, I've experienced, as an African American, I've experienced it looking down the barrel of a policeman's gun as early as the age of 12, and then again at 14, and then again at 15 years old. And neither of these moments was, it was not during a commission of a crime. I wasn't that kind of a young man. I've experienced it at the corporate level, seeing and hearing, very racist comments secondhand through email, overhearing conversations that are just fucking disgusting. I also believe that understanding the kind of racism you're experiencing helps tell the story of the kind of people you're dealing with. Now, there's no magic bullet to combating racism because it's such a deeply rooted part of American culture as well as other cultures. The challenges, I'll try to narrow it down to a couple. Like saying someone or something is racist is really a broad brush, to paint with. It's almost like telling someone they have an odor problem, but not specifically identifying it as just a funky ass or bad breath. So that's a challenge in dealing with it, on one level. Not understanding it on a more granular level, it really handicaps our ability to effectively address it and understand it. The value in understanding that granularity is especially critical because it shapes the way you can target it, whether that source of racism comes from those that carry a badge or shape public policy, or if you're in a social setting. It really does tell a story, and maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. The misconnection is that racism is a one-size flavor like it's fucking Coke Classic, right? That's just my impression of it, the way I hear people talk about it. The second point I'll make, in all fairness, is that sometimes racism is confused or conflated with a person that dislikes cultural elements, which we'll go into a little bit later. So reconnecting the dots, there is no one flavor of racism. It's more like a shitty box of Lucky Charms with different flavors. There's a lot happening. I'm going to say something people may strongly disagree with. Look, racism is not really that much about color. Color is just an optical convenience for division. It's a tool for people to point and say, look over there at these people, they are, and then fill in the blank with some accusation, followed by this group's skin color, some characteristics, but it all has little to do or little to nothing to do with the core issue of what's going on. It's like this weird progression. So like the low-hanging fruit is color. And if color is not something, if color's not a point of division, then they move on through the progression. They go to religion. Like, oh, well, they're this religion and we're that religion. If that's not available, they go to political party or they go to tribe. It's just this weird progression. And it happens here in America because we're the fucking melting pot. We got so many different colors of people here, right? But in Africa, you can't really pull that shit. So you have to move along the progression and go to religion, ideology, politics, some other horse shit. Same thing in other countries where people share the same skin color. An important point, dude, there's no biological basis to support this notion of racial superiority. There's plenty of scientific studies. Anybody can read up. One piece that comes to mind from me, there was I think a 2017 study that Harvard published. So if you really want to know if there's a scientific basis, Google, right? But the act of cherry picking negative elements about an ethnic group and then deliberately piecing them together to paint a negative picture of a race isn't science. That's a motherfucking collage. That's what kids do. Literally. And then it's also just spin or just flat out a fucking lie. Using skin tone as an identifier to reduce a person whom you don't know to being some stereotypically inferior thing is a dishonest game that kids play. And when I say kids, I mean people who are young in the brain. Okay? Noticing skin tone is no great achievement for anybody with two fucking eyeballs. So if you want to celebrate that, congratulations. Good for you. You see colors. You want a short list of other creatures that see colors? Birds, insects, fish, fucking squirrels. Congratulations, you're in good company. The optics of color, facial features, and hair texture are not indicators of success or intelligence or a lack of such. For every kinky hair smart person, there is a not so smart one. For every straight hair criminal, there are law-abiding people with straight hair. I don't understand why people keep falling back on this shit. Secondly, be clear on what racism actually is. Disliking an element of one's race doesn't necessarily make a person a racist. If you do dislike elements of one's race, it's okay. As long as you're not a fucking asshole about it. You don't have to. Nor would you honestly love each and everything about each and every race. I don't love everything about my race. But by the same token, I overwhelmingly love my people. I fucking love black people. All right? So, for example, if you think Buddhism is silly, or you dislike country music, or you think soul food sucks, it doesn't necessarily make you a racist person towards Asians, whites, and black people. Maybe it's just not your taste. Maybe it makes you a little closed-minded. Food and language, those are only elements of race. Racism comes into play the minute you believe those elements comprehensively lessen or reduce that race's value on a human level, or if you think it serves as predictors of intelligence or behavior. So are there racist types? Like can we break racist people in different types? I definitely think so. I generally put them in one of three buckets. I don't have names for them, but if we're going to start, I would say type 1. The type 1 races are those people who, they're not they're not particularly flying at a high altitude mentally. And as my uncle once put it, some people just don't have the mental strength to lift heavy intellectual weights. Could be genetics, could be education, could be a result of being raised with a set of unfortunate circumstances like poverty and hatred and abuse. Who knows? That's just how it is. Most of us aren't mentally endowed like a Elon Musk or a Neil deGrasse Tyson or a Bill Gates. We're not. That's not how it goes. Well, not today. And I've come across these type ones in the inner city. I've come across them in the corporate world. I've come across them in the rural parts of different parts of the world. And what makes it so difficult with this type is, that's why it's difficult to have rational conversation with the type 1, or what I'm calling the type 1 races. They can't be reasoned with. It's exhausting. They're not interested in facts. They're closed-minded. Everything is about stereotypes, hatred, parroting attitudes they've heard from decades and generations before them, and they're okay with that. Ignorance is a normal practice. It's a normal state of being. They slip that shit on every morning like it's their favorite pair of pants, and they walk right on in the house feeling whole. Trying to reason with them is akin to explaining algebra to someone that hasn't mastered basic math. It's a very difficult conversation to have with people. Now, they might be competent in a particular trade or task perhaps, but in the matters of race, they're weaker. Race relations with these people, it's an undeveloped muscle. These people want to believe that they're better than another race because they need to believe it. When your heart and your bank account and your overall level of happiness and satisfaction is empty, racism for some of these people is a convenient mindset to fall back on. They need somebody to blame. So some of these people need a lie to elevate their imagined and unearned status in the world. Looking in the mirror and taking personal accountability is just too painful. So moving on to, I'm going to call the type 2, I think there can be some overlap with the first type in terms of, holding false beliefs in a particular race. But I think this group probably has the most promise. They're smarter than the type 1s, yet still handicapped with circumstances, perhaps, as the type 1s have. And this group reminds me of a term I may have mentioned in a previous episode called design architecture. So imagine a world where every micro interaction through the family unit, community figures, media, like they cast this very slanted, negative, and toxic context toward outside races. And it's just confusing. It's incongruent. It's all fucked up. Like imagine watching, I don't know, let's say the Pokemon movie, but you're listening to the director's commentary to Scarface. Like that shit just doesn't match up. But these people, they'll take it in and they'll run with it. The optics and the commentary don't match, but for a naive, innocent, and impressionable child with no life experiences, or even perhaps they're disenfranchised and they're thirsty for knowledge and they look up to the people around them and the elders, it's an easier state of mind to influence. I think there are people in this group that gradually change perspective, especially when they are developmentally able to compare what they see as an independent thinker versus what they were socialized to think for many years. Like they start comparing notes and it's like, okay, what I've been told for all these years, perhaps decades, aren't matching up to what I'm seeing in front of me. That's when they make a change. Hence, some, let's say, white supremacists changing point of view on minorities and rebuking the Klan and departing from the neo-Nazis. Hence, the evolution of, let's say, A figure like Malcolm X evolving from a stance of believing that all white people were evil to a person that embraced all races. Some people do eventually take the step of seeing the figurative light. It's just a question of all the right elements lining up where there's a path out of that mindset. The last type that I'll call type 3, the least forgivable bunch. Like, I believe in redemption if people work towards that and demonstrate contrition, but I'm going to call them the secret or the type 3. My problem with the type 3, these are intelligent people. These are higher functioning people mentally. And they secretly acknowledge that the notion of racial superiority being a myth, like, they know it's bullshit. Yet they continue pushing this idea for recreational or financial and political gain. Why? Like, I just think it's gamesmanship. I think it's wicked. I think it's insecurity, unhappiness, self-hatred. And here's what's so felonious about it. In a world where, blacks, Latinos, Middle Easterners, Asians hold high positions everywhere in the Supreme Court, big tech, White House, like they're in plain view. These people knowingly and willingly push an agenda of inferiority. They are self-serving, maniacally selfish people. They pull the type 1s and the type 2s and other type 3s into this vortex of fuckery under the illusion that they care about whatever race they're pushing or whatever race they are. They make themselves as being the victims. They've been targeted. There's a war on their fill in the blank, whatever race they are. You ever hear that horse shit? You can just turn to certain cable networks and news stations and hear it, right? But the bigger agenda is that they want to use the 1s and 2s as their pawns. And what fucks me up is that the 1s and 2s are instruments for them. And it doesn't seem like they even know it. They're just ornaments for the 3s. And the sad part is that the 1 and 2s will take a bullet for a 3. They'll sacrifice themselves for a 3. They'll do jail time for a 3. But a 3 will never do that shit for a 1 or 2. The 3 will never be a martyr or find nobility in sacrificing his or herself for a type 1 or type 2 racist. That's the game. So what do you do if you're confused? And this is not an easy subject to tackle. It's especially what's going on in 2019. I think of a quote by the former Japanese swordsman and philosopher Miyamoto Musashi, and I think he captures it beautifully. He says, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." And taking that context, or taking that quote in the context of race relations, like it's like, dude, don't think so highly of your own interests of race to where you cripple and weaken communities, cities, states, and nations over an arrogant, self-serving, hate-filled agenda. If you're encountering the type 1, the low-flying races, I say keep it moving unless they're showing some willingness. But I think the blueprint of that kind of silliness and dysfunction is by far too ridiculously engineered to reason with. And I would insist on normally being the best ambassador as you can be for your own race, but I would not try to reason with these people. That's just me. I think on a personal level, that means, you have to cleanse yourself of any stupid bias towards other races. And a lot of us have them. I've had to work on my own. Be open-minded. Be willing to engage in an opposing view, provided that there is respect coming from the other person or the other people, not this exchange of insults and threats. It's difficult for the type 2 races to stay in that lane when they continuously see hard evidence that that other races are smart and kind and funny and personable. I think this is a group where patience can pay off if we're trying to welcome people into the bosom of humanity. I think through, like, over time, through some number of micro interaction, these are the people that need to be given time, to make a gradual change. I think for the type 3 races, the best arsenal to fight them with is truth, to be unified, to give deserved respect. It's hard for them to maintain credence in their dogma when their messages are contradicted by a hard reality that people aren't fucked up as they are, that people can be kind, that you and I are the same. I love my family just like you love your family. We have a lot in common. I can go on down the list. Yeah, I mean, that's what I got, man. This obviously not an easy subject. Dealing with some races are like dealing with flat earthers. They just need something to lean on because they're not right. There's nothing godly about them. There's nothing humane about them, or very little humane about them. And this is, I don't know, maybe it's just like some weird drug. I can't quite figure it out. So anyway, that's it. If you enjoy the podcast and if it's in your heart, feel free to share, subscribe, do all the other nice shit. Follow on Twitter at MisconnectedP. Follow on Instagram at Misconnected Podcast. It's on all platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, TuneIn, YouTube. I think maybe iHeartRadio or something like that. Fuck, I can't keep up with all of them. But anyway, keep your head, be well, take care.